Rise above the crowd. How to become the person nobody can ignore. Written and published by Rising Audiobook. Introduction. Have you ever felt invisible? Have you ever watched someone else receive the opportunities, recognition and respect you secretly hoped for, even though you knew you were just as capable, maybe even more talented? It's a painful feeling, not because you want attention, but because being overlooked makes you question your value. It makes you wonder whether your hard work matters, whether your dreams are realistic, and whether you'll ever become the person you know you can be. But here's the truth most people never realize. The world does not reward potential. Potential is invisible. The world rewards value. It rewards character. It rewards consistency. Every day, millions of people blend into the crowd because they spend their lives trying to fit in, seeking approval, avoiding risks, and waiting for the perfect moment to act. Meanwhile, a small group of people rises above the noise. They command respect when they enter a room. Their work gets noticed. Their words carry weight. Their presence leaves an impression. What makes them different? It isn't luck. It isn't talent alone. And it certainly isn't perfection. The difference is found in the choices they make every day, the standards they set, the habits they build, the responsibility they accept, and the courage they show when others choose comfort. This audiobook is your guide to making that transformation. By the end, you'll understand how to rise above the crowd, unlock your full potential, and become the kind of person whose presence, work, and character nobody can ignore. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The Pain of Being Overlooked. Imagine standing in a crowded room, filled with voices, laughter, and conversations. You have ideas worth sharing. You have talents you've spent years developing. You have dreams that matter deeply to you. Yet somehow, nobody notices. Nobody asks for your opinion. Nobody sees the effort you've invested behind the scenes. It's as if you're present physically, but invisible emotionally. For many people, this isn't just an occasional experience. It's a way of life. Few pains are discussed less often than the pain of being overlooked. People talk about failure, heartbreak, and disappointment, but they rarely talk about what it feels like to work hard and remain unseen. They rarely talk about the quiet ache that develops when your contributions go unnoticed and your potential remains hidden from the world. The truth is that being ignored hurts, because human beings are wired to seek significance. We all want to feel that our lives matter. We want to believe that our efforts count for something. We want to know that who we are and what we do has value. When those needs go unmet for long periods, something begins to happen inside us. Doubt enters the picture. At first, the doubt is small. You tell yourself that your opportunity will come later. You convince yourself that people simply haven't noticed you yet. But as weeks turn into months, and months turn into years, the questions become harder to ignore. What if I'm not as talented as I thought? What if I don't have what it takes? What if nobody ever notices me? These questions can quietly erode confidence from the inside. Not all wounds leave visible scars. Some wounds attack your belief in yourself. Some wounds convince you to play smaller than you're capable of playing. Perhaps you've experienced this before. Maybe you worked hard on a project that received little recognition. Maybe you watched someone less skilled receive the promotion you wanted. Maybe you've spent years developing abilities that nobody seems to appreciate. In those moments, frustration can easily transform into bitterness. But there is an important truth you must understand. Being overlooked does not mean you are worthless. Being overlooked does not mean you lack potential. And being overlooked certainly does not mean your story is over. One of the greatest misconceptions in life is believing that talent automatically creates success. Many people grow up believing that if they become talented enough, recognition will naturally follow. They imagine that excellence will somehow announce itself to the world. Reality is often very different. The world is full of talented people who remain invisible. There are gifted writers whose work sits unread. There are brilliant employees whose ideas are never heard. There are creative artists, entrepreneurs and dreamers who possess enormous ability yet struggle to gain attention. Talent is valuable, But talent alone is rarely enough. The world notices value that is visible. It notices people who consistently show up, communicate effectively, build relationships, and continue improving long after others have quit. In many cases, what separates recognized individuals from overlooked individuals is not talent but exposure, persistence, confidence, and personal growth. This realization can be difficult to accept, but it is also incredibly empowering. Why? Because if recognition depended solely on natural talent, many people would be trapped by limitations they could never change. But if growth, discipline, communication, and consistency matter, then your future remains within your control. Unfortunately, many people never reach this understanding. Instead, they allow rejection to define them. Every ignored application, every unanswered message, every missed opportunity becomes evidence against themselves. Gradually, they stop trying. They lower their expectations. They silence their ambitions before the world ever has the chance to reject them again. This is how confidence dies, not in one dramatic moment, but through countless small disappointments that accumulate over time. A person who once dreamed boldly begins settling for less. A person who once believed in themselves begins questioning everything. A person who once stood tall starts shrinking to fit the expectations of others. Yet history repeatedly teaches a different lesson. Many of the people we admire today spent years being overlooked. Before they became respected, they were ignored. Before they became influential, they were doubted. Before their abilities were recognized, they often worked in obscurity while nobody was paying attention. What allowed them to continue? They understood something that most people never learn. Being overlooked is often not a final judgment. It is feedback. Sometimes it is life telling you to improve your skills. Sometimes it is an invitation to strengthen your character. Sometimes it is pushing you toward growth that would never occur if success arrived too quickly. The people who eventually rise above the crowd are not always the most talented. Often they are the ones who refuse to let invisibility become their identity. They refuse to let rejection define their worth. They refuse to let temporary setbacks become permanent conclusions. Most importantly, they continue growing when nobody is watching. That is where true transformation begins, not when the applause arrives, not when recognition finally comes, but in the quiet moments when nobody sees your effort and you choose to keep going anyway. Because the person who eventually becomes impossible to ignore is often the same person who once felt completely invisible. The difference is that they decided their value would not be determined by who noticed them today. They chose to become better, stronger, wiser, and more valuable, regardless of who was paying attention. And that decision changes everything. Chapter 2. The day you stop seeking approval. There comes a moment in many people's lives that feels both terrifying and liberating. It is the moment they realize they have spent years living for other people's opinions, not their own dreams, not their own values, not their own vision, but the expectations, judgments, and approval of everyone around them. For some, this realization arrives suddenly. For others, it unfolds slowly over time. But when it finally happens, it changes everything. The desire to be liked is natural. Human beings are social creatures. We want acceptance, we want connection, we want to belong. There is nothing wrong with wanting people to appreciate us. The problem begins when the need for approval becomes more important than being true to ourselves. Many people spend their entire lives trapped in this invisible prison. They choose careers they don't love because they want to impress others. They stay silent when they should speak because they fear criticism. They hide their ambitions because they worry about being judged. They shape their personalities to fit what others expect, rather than discovering who they truly are. At first, approval feels rewarding. Every compliment provides a temporary boost. Every sign of acceptance feels comforting. Every positive reaction creates a small sense of security. But approval is a fragile foundation on which to build a life. The moment your happiness depends on other people's opinions, you surrender control of your self-worth. Think about how exhausting that is. Imagine waking up every day worried about what everyone thinks of you. Imagine constantly adjusting your behavior to avoid criticism. Imagine measuring your value based on how much validation you receive. It is a battle you can never win because people will always have opinions. No matter what you do, someone will approve, someone will disagree, and someone will misunderstand you completely. The people who rise above the crowd eventually learn a powerful lesson. You do not need everyone's approval to live an extraordinary life. In fact, many of the most successful individuals in history were criticized long before they were respected. Their ideas were questioned. Their decisions were mocked. Their ambitions were dismissed. If they had waited for universal approval, they would never have accomplished anything meaningful. The truth is that approval often comes after success, not before it. Most people want permission before they act. They want reassurance before they take risks. They want guarantees before they pursue their dreams. But life rarely works that way. The path toward becoming remarkable requires the courage to move forward, even when others doubt you. One reason approval seeking is so dangerous is that it creates fear. When your goal is to be liked, you begin avoiding anything that could make people uncomfortable. You stop expressing bold ideas. You stop taking meaningful risks. You stop standing out. Ironically, the very thing that could make you memorable gets sacrificed in your attempt to fit in. Consider how many talented people remain invisible because they are trying too hard to please everyone. They become experts at blending into the background. They avoid conflict. They avoid attention. They avoid criticism. Yet by doing so, they also avoid growth. Nobody becomes impossible to ignore by constantly seeking permission. People become remarkable when they develop the courage to be authentic. Authenticity does not mean being arrogant or dismissive of others. It means living in alignment with your values instead of constantly adjusting yourself to satisfy everyone around you. It means having the confidence to say, "This is who I am, these are my goals, this is what I believe matters." That level of honesty is powerful because it creates inner freedom. When you stop seeking approval, something remarkable happens. You begin making decisions based on purpose rather than fear. You stop asking, "What will people think?" and start asking, "What is the right thing for me to do?" You stop chasing validation and start pursuing growth. The energy you once spent trying to impress others becomes available for something far more important, building your life. You become willing to learn new skills, even if you look inexperienced at first. You become willing to fail because failure no longer threatens your identity. You become willing to stand apart from the crowd because you understand that greatness rarely grows in conformity. This does not mean criticism stops hurting completely. We are human. Negative opinions will still affect us from time to time, but they no longer control us. Instead of allowing criticism to determine our direction, we evaluate it, learn from it if necessary, and continue moving forward. There is tremendous strength in reaching the point where your self-respect matters more than your popularity. Because popularity is unpredictable. It comes and goes. People's opinions change. Trends change. Circumstances change. Character remains. Purpose remains. Self-respect remains. The day you stop seeking approval is not the day everyone begins liking you. It is something far more valuable than that. It is the day you stop needing them to. It is the day you reclaim ownership of your identity. It is the day you stop shrinking yourself to fit inside other people's expectations. And it is the day you begin becoming the person you were always meant to be, a person driven not by the desire to be accepted, but by the commitment to become exceptional. That is where true freedom begins, and that freedom is one of the first steps toward becoming someone nobody can ignore. Chapter 3. Taking responsibility for your life. One day, sooner or later, life presents every person with a difficult truth. It usually doesn't arrive during moments of comfort. It doesn't appear when everything is going according to plan. Instead, it often arrives during periods of frustration, disappointment, or struggle. It comes when you've waited long enough for circumstances to change, for opportunities to appear, or for someone else to solve the problems standing in your way. And then in a quiet moment of clarity, you realize something powerful. Nobody is coming to save you. At first, that realization can feel harsh. It can feel lonely. It can even feel unfair. We grow up believing that someone will eventually provide the answers. We expect a mentor to appear, a lucky break to arrive, or a perfect opportunity to transform our lives overnight. We convince ourselves that our future depends on factors outside our control. But the moment you stop waiting and start taking responsibility, your life begins to change. Many people spend years trapped in a cycle of blame. They blame their circumstances. They blame their upbringing. They blame the economy, their boss, their family, their education, or bad luck. While some of these challenges are real, constantly focusing on them creates a dangerous mindset. The more you blame, the less power you feel. Think about it. If every problem in your life is someone else's fault, then every solution is also in someone else's hands. You become a passenger instead of a driver. You spend your days hoping conditions improve rather than creating improvement yourself. This is why responsibility is so powerful. Responsibility is not about blaming yourself for everything that happens. It is about accepting ownership of what happens next. You may not control where you started. You may not control what happened to you in the past. You may not control every obstacle that appears in your path, but you always have influence over your response, and that response determines your future. The people who rise above the crowd understand this principle deeply. They stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and begin asking, "What can I do about it?" They stop focusing on excuses and start focusing on solutions. This shift seems small, but it changes everything. Imagine two people facing the same setback. Both lose an opportunity they desperately wanted. The first person spends months complaining about how unfair life is. They replay the disappointment repeatedly and convince themselves that success is reserved for other people. The second person feels the same pain, but responds differently. They ask what they can learn. They identify weaknesses they need to improve. They develop new skills. They prepare for the next opportunity. Months later, their lives look completely different. Not because one person had better circumstances, but because one person chose responsibility. Personal responsibility is often misunderstood. Many people hear the word and imagine burden or pressure. In reality, responsibility creates freedom. It gives you the ability to influence your own destiny. When you accept responsibility, you stop seeing yourself as a victim of circumstances. You begin seeing yourself as an active participant in your own story. That perspective creates confidence. Confidence does not come from knowing that life will always be easy. Confidence comes from knowing that whatever happens, you will find a way to respond. Every time you take ownership of a problem, you strengthen that belief. Every time you solve a challenge instead of avoiding it, you become stronger. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, you prove that you can trust yourself. Over time, this creates a foundation that cannot easily be shaken. One of the most important moments in personal growth occurs when you stop expecting others to care more about your future than you do. Nobody will be as invested in your dreams as you are. Nobody will think about your goals as often as you do. Nobody can do the work that belongs to you. And that's not something to fear. It's something to embrace. Because the moment you understand that your future is largely shaped by your actions, you gain a level of control that many people never experience. You stop waiting for motivation. You stop waiting for permission. You stop waiting for perfect conditions. Instead, you begin acting. You take the first step, even when you're uncertain. You learn, even when progress feels slow. You continue moving forward, even when results are invisible. That is what separates leaders from followers. Leaders are not people who have all the answers. They are people who accept responsibility when others avoid it. They take ownership of problems instead of looking for someone else to blame. The same principle applies to your personal life. If your health needs improvement, take responsibility. If your finances need improvement, take responsibility. If your skills need improvement, take responsibility. Not because everything is your fault, but because taking ownership gives you the power to change things. The most successful people in the world are not necessarily the most talented. Often, they are simply the people who consistently choose responsibility over excuses. They understand that progress begins the moment blame ends. There will always be reasons why something is difficult. There will always be obstacles, setbacks, and circumstances beyond your control. But there will also always be something you can do, something you can learn, something you can improve, something you can change. The day you fully accept responsibility for your life is the day you stop waiting for rescue and start creating results. It is the day you stop handing your power to circumstances. It is the day you become the author of your own future. And when that happens, you are no longer just another face in the crowd. You become someone who is moving with purpose, acting with intention, and building a life that reflects your highest potential. That is where real transformation begins. Chapter 4. Raising Your Standards. There is a quiet moment that changes the direction of a person's life. It is not dramatic. There are no flashing lights, no applause, and no sudden breakthrough. It happens when someone looks honestly at their current reality and decides, this is no longer good enough. That decision may sound simple, but it carries enormous power. Every result in your life is connected to a standard you have accepted. The quality of your relationships, your health, your finances, your work ethic, and even your self-confidence are all influenced by what you tolerate on a daily basis. People often focus on goals, but goals alone rarely create lasting change. Standards do. A goal is something you want to achieve. A standard is something you refuse to fall below. That is why standards are so powerful. Goals can be postponed. Goals can be forgotten. Goals can be abandoned when life becomes difficult. Standards, on the other hand, become part of your identity. They shape your decisions, even when nobody is watching. Most people underestimate the role standards play in determining their future. They believe success is mainly about talent, intelligence, or luck. While those factors can help, they are rarely the deciding factor. More often, the difference between average and exceptional people is found in what they are willing to accept from themselves. Think about two individuals with similar abilities. One consistently shows up on time, keeps promises, takes responsibility, and strives to improve. The other frequently makes excuses, settles for mediocrity, and only puts in effort when they feel motivated. Over time, the gap between them becomes enormous. Not because one was born extraordinary, but because one maintained higher standards. The truth is that every standard you accept sends a message to yourself. When you allow laziness to dominate your days, you tell yourself that your potential is not important. When you repeatedly break promises to yourself, you teach your mind that your word has little value. When you tolerate habits that pull you away from your goals, you quietly lower your expectations of who you can become. On the other hand, every time you choose discipline over comfort, every time you honor a commitment, and every time you push yourself to improve, you reinforce a different message. You begin telling yourself, I am someone who expects more. That message changes how you see yourself. Many people wait for confidence before they raise their standards. In reality, the opposite is true. Confidence often grows because standards are raised. When you consistently act in ways that align with excellence, you develop respect for yourself. And self-respect is one of the strongest foundations of confidence. Consider the people you admire most. Chances are, they do not simply possess impressive skills. They carry themselves differently. They have a commitment to quality. They refuse to settle for careless work. They follow through on what they start. Their standards influence every area of their lives. What makes this especially important is that standards are contagious. The expectations you set for yourself affect the people around you. When you commit to excellence, others notice. When you consistently demonstrate discipline and integrity, you inspire trust. Your behavior becomes a reflection of your values. However, raising your standards is not always comfortable. In fact, it often requires letting go of habits, excuses, and environments that once felt familiar. Growth demands change, and change can be uncomfortable. There will be moments when the easier option seems tempting. There will be moments when nobody would notice if you lowered your expectations. Those moments matter, because the standards you maintain during difficult times reveal who you truly are. Anyone can perform well when conditions are ideal. Anyone can be disciplined when motivation is high. The real test comes when you are tired, discouraged, or facing obstacles. That is when standards become more important than feelings. The remarkable thing about raising your standards is that small improvements create powerful results over time. You do not need to transform your entire life overnight. You simply need to become a little more intentional each day. A slightly stronger work ethic, a slightly better attitude, a slightly higher level of discipline. Those small changes compound. Weeks become months, months become years, and eventually, the person staring back at you in the mirror is no longer the same person who began the journey. The crowd often settles for what is easy. It follows convenience, comfort, and short-term satisfaction. But the people who rise above the crowd choose something different. They choose growth over comfort, excellence over excuses, standards over shortcuts. The hidden difference between ordinary and extraordinary people is rarely found in a single defining moment. More often, it is found in thousands of small decisions made consistently over time. The day you decide to raise your standards is the day you stop negotiating with your potential. It is the day you begin demanding more from yourself, not out of self-criticism, but out of self-respect. And when your standards rise, your life begins to rise with them. Chapter 5. Building Unshakable Self-Belief. A young man once stood at the edge of a gym parking lot, staring at the entrance. To anyone passing by, it looked like a normal day. But inside his mind, a battle was taking place. He felt insecure about his appearance. He worried that everyone inside would judge him. He questioned whether he belonged there at all. For several minutes, he sat in his car, arguing with himself. Then he stepped out, walked through the door, and completed a simple workout. Nothing extraordinary happened that day. Nobody applauded him, nobody noticed his effort. Yet something important changed. For the first time, he proved to himself that he could act, despite fear. That is where self-belief begins. Most people misunderstand confidence. They imagine it as a feeling that appears before action. They think confident people wake up each morning filled with certainty, motivation, and courage. They assume confidence is something you either have or don't have. But real confidence doesn't work that way. Confidence is not the cause of action. Confidence is the result of action. Many people spend years waiting to feel ready before pursuing their goals. They wait until they feel confident enough to start a business, speak in public, apply for a better opportunity, or chase a dream that matters to them. Unfortunately, readiness rarely arrives first. More often, confidence is built through the process itself. Every person you admire once felt uncertain. Every expert was once a beginner. Every successful individual once doubted themselves. The difference is that they acted anyway. One of the biggest obstacles to self-belief is the mistaken idea that confidence comes from positive thinking alone. Positive thinking can be helpful, but it has limits. You can repeat affirmations all day long, but if your actions constantly contradict your words, your mind will not fully believe them. Your brain pays attention to evidence. If you repeatedly tell yourself that you are capable, but never challenge yourself, your mind remains unconvinced. On the other hand, when you consistently take action, even small action, you begin gathering proof. Proof changes everything. Imagine someone who decides to read 10 pages of a valuable book every day. The habit seems small. At first, they don't feel dramatically different. But after a month, they have completed hundreds of pages. After several months, they possess knowledge they didn't have before. More importantly, they have developed trust in themselves. Every day they kept their promise. They strengthened their self-belief. This is one of the most powerful truths about confidence. Confidence grows whenever you keep promises to yourself. When you say you will wake up early and you do it, confidence grows. When you commit to exercising and follow through, confidence grows. When you decide to learn a skill and practice consistently, confidence grows. These moments may seem insignificant, but together they form the foundation of self-respect. Many people break promises to themselves so often that they unknowingly weaken their own confidence. They set goals they never pursue. They make commitments they never honor. Over time, they stop trusting their own word. Imagine having a friend who constantly made promises and never followed through. Eventually, you would stop believing them. The same thing happens internally when you repeatedly disappoint yourself. Fortunately, the opposite is also true. Every time you honor your commitments, you strengthen the relationship you have with yourself. This is why small victories matter so much. Society often celebrates massive achievements, but life is built on smaller moments. The daily decision to continue when motivation fades, the choice to finish what you started, the willingness to take one more step when nobody is watching. Those victories may seem invisible to the world, but they are visible to you, and your mind is always paying attention. Another important truth about self-belief is that action reduces fear. Fear often grows in the absence of movement. The longer you delay something, the larger it appears in your imagination. A difficult conversation becomes terrifying. A new challenge feels impossible. A goal begins to seem unreachable. But the moment you take action, something shifts. You stop imagining and start experiencing. You stop worrying about every possible outcome and begin focusing on the next step. Action creates clarity. Action creates momentum. Action creates confidence. The people who rise above the crowd are not fearless. They simply understand that courage comes before confidence. They know that waiting for certainty often leads nowhere. Instead, they move forward despite doubt. This is especially important because life will constantly test your belief in yourself. There will be failures. There will be setbacks. There will be moments when progress feels painfully slow. During those times, confidence cannot depend on external results alone. If your self-belief is based only on success, it will disappear whenever challenges arise. True self-belief runs deeper. It comes from knowing that you can handle difficulties. It comes from trusting your ability to learn. It comes from believing that setbacks are temporary and growth is possible. This kind of confidence cannot be given to you by other people. It cannot be purchased. It cannot be borrowed. It must be earned. And the good news is that anyone can earn it, not through perfection, not through talent alone, but through consistent action repeated day after day. The person who becomes impossible to ignore is not necessarily the smartest person in the room. Often, they are simply the person who developed an unwavering belief in their ability to grow, adapt, and persevere. They trust themselves because they have built a history of showing up, a history of trying again, a history of keeping promises. And that history becomes a source of strength that no criticism, setback, or obstacle can easily destroy. So if you want to build unshakable self-belief, stop waiting for confidence to arrive. Create it. Take the first step. Keep the promise. Win the small battle. Then do it again tomorrow. Because every action you take is casting a vote for the person you are becoming. And eventually, those votes become an identity. An identity built not on wishful thinking, but on evidence. An identity strong enough to carry you far beyond the crowd. Chapter 6. Doing what most people won't. While most people are sleeping, someone is studying. While most people are scrolling endlessly through their phones, someone is practicing a skill. While most people are looking for shortcuts, someone is quietly putting in the work. The difference seems small in the moment. A single early morning doesn't change a life. One workout doesn't transform a body. 1 hour of focused practice doesn't create mastery. But the person who consistently chooses these actions is building something powerful that most people never see. They are building an advantage. The truth is that extraordinary results rarely come from extraordinary talent alone. More often, they come from a willingness to do what most people are unwilling to do. The individuals who rise above the crowd are not always the smartest, the luckiest, or the most naturally gifted. They are often the ones who embrace discipline when others choose comfort. This is not an exciting message. In fact, it is one that many people try to avoid. We live in a world that celebrates quick success stories and overnight transformations. Social media often shows the rewards but hides the years of sacrifice behind them. As a result, many people become addicted to immediate gratification. They want the reward without the process, the recognition without the effort, the success without the struggle. But life does not work that way. Everything valuable requires a price. The stronger body requires consistent exercise. The successful career requires continuous learning. The meaningful relationship requires time and attention. The respected reputation requires years of integrity. The question is not whether you will pay a price. The question is whether you will pay it now or later. Most people choose immediate comfort. They choose the easier path because it feels good in the moment. They avoid difficult conversations. They postpone important work. They skip opportunities to improve because improvement requires effort. At first, this seems harmless. After all, what difference does one missed workout make? What difference does one wasted evening make? Very little. But life is not shaped by one decision. Life is shaped by thousands of decisions repeated over time. Every choice either moves you closer to the person you want to become or further away from that person. The crowd often focuses on what feels good today. Successful people focus on what will matter tomorrow. This ability to delay gratification is one of the most powerful advantages a person can develop. Delayed gratification means being willing to sacrifice a smaller reward now in exchange for a greater reward later. It means understanding that temporary discomfort often creates long-term freedom. Imagine two individuals starting from the same position. One spends every free hour seeking entertainment and comfort. They avoid challenges whenever possible. They choose activities that provide instant pleasure but little growth. The other invests a portion of each day developing valuable skills. They read when others scroll. They practice when others procrastinate. They save when others spend impulsively. They make sacrifices that nobody notices. For a while, there may appear to be little difference between them. Days pass, weeks pass, months pass. Then something interesting happens. The gap begins to widen. The disciplined individual develops knowledge, confidence, and opportunities that the other person does not possess. What once seemed like small daily choices eventually produce dramatically different outcomes. This is why discipline is often misunderstood. Many people think discipline is about restriction. They imagine it as a life filled with sacrifice and deprivation. In reality, discipline creates freedom. The disciplined person enjoys the freedom of good health because they took care of their body. They enjoy financial freedom because they controlled their spending. They enjoy professional freedom because they developed valuable skills. They enjoy emotional freedom because they learned self-control. Discipline may feel difficult in the short term, but it often creates an easier life in the long term. The opposite is also true. Undisciplined choices may feel easy today, but they often create greater difficulties later. One of the reasons so few people develop discipline is because its rewards are delayed. Human beings naturally want immediate feedback. We want to see results quickly. We want proof that our efforts are working. But many of life's greatest rewards operate on a delay. You may study for months before seeing significant improvement. You may work hard for years before achieving recognition. You may invest consistently without seeing immediate financial rewards. This is where many people quit. They mistake a lack of immediate results for a lack of progress. They assume that because they cannot yet see the outcome, their effort is not working. The most successful people understand something different. They understand that progress is often invisible before it becomes obvious. A seed spends a long time growing beneath the surface before anyone sees evidence of its existence, yet important work is happening the entire time. The same is true in life. Every disciplined choice strengthens your character. Every sacrifice develops resilience. Every difficult task completed builds momentum. Even when nobody notices, Growth is occurring. In fact, some of the most important growth happens in private. The crowd sees the achievement. They rarely see the years of preparation. They see the confident speaker, but not the countless hours of practice. They see the successful entrepreneur, but not the years of uncertainty and hard work. They see the accomplished professional, but not the sacrifices made along the way. What separates exceptional people from average people is often their relationship with discomfort. Average people view discomfort as something to avoid. Exceptional people view discomfort as a sign of growth. They understand that the path to becoming stronger, wiser, and more capable usually requires temporary struggle. They don't enjoy every difficult moment, they simply understand its value. And that understanding changes everything. The reality is that becoming someone nobody can ignore requires choices that many people are unwilling to make. It requires persistence when motivation disappears. It requires commitment when excitement fades. It requires discipline when comfort becomes tempting. But every time you choose growth over convenience, you separate yourself from the crowd. Every time you keep going when others quit, you build an advantage. Every time you delay gratification for a greater future, you strengthen your character, because greatness is rarely created in moments of comfort. It is forged in moments of discipline. It is built through sacrifice. It is earned through consistency. And in a world where most people are looking for the easiest path, the simple willingness to do what most people won't can make you impossible to ignore. That willingness becomes your edge. And over time, that edge becomes your transformation. Chapter 7. Mastering your mind in difficult times. Storms reveal things that sunny days never can. When life is going well, almost anyone can feel confident. It is easy to stay positive when opportunities are flowing, goals are being achieved, and everything seems to be moving in the right direction. But character is not revealed during easy seasons. Character is revealed when life becomes difficult. It is revealed when plans fall apart, when the promotion goes to someone else, when the business struggles, when relationships end, when efforts seem to produce little reward, when the future becomes uncertain. These moments test more than your patience. They test your mindset. They test your ability to remain focused, hopeful, and determined when circumstances tempt you to give up. The reality is that every person who rises above the crowd eventually faces adversity. There are no exceptions. Challenges are not signs that you are on the wrong path. In many cases, they are proof that you are growing. Yet most people respond to adversity in one of two ways. They either allow it to break them, or they allow it to build them. The event may be the same, but the interpretation changes everything. Consider two people who experience failure. One sees failure as evidence that they are incapable. They conclude that success is not meant for them. They become discouraged and retreat from future opportunities. The other person experiences the same failure, but asks a different question. Instead of asking, "Why did this happen to me?" they ask, "What can this teach me?" That single shift in perspective can completely alter the direction of a life. One of the greatest skills you can develop is the ability to control the meaning you assign to difficult experiences. Life does not always give you control over events, but it often gives you control over your response. This is where mental strength begins. Mental strength is not pretending that pain doesn't exist. It is not suppressing emotions or acting as though setbacks do not matter. True mental strength is the ability to face reality honestly, without allowing it to destroy your spirit. It means acknowledging disappointment without surrendering to despair. It means feeling fear without allowing fear to make your decisions. It means experiencing failure without allowing failure to define your identity. Too many people make the mistake of turning temporary setbacks into permanent conclusions. They lose one opportunity and decide they will never succeed. They receive criticism and begin doubting their abilities. They experience rejection and start questioning their worth. But setbacks are events. They are not identities. Failure is something that happens. It is not who you are. This distinction is incredibly important because your mind believes the stories you repeatedly tell it. If you constantly tell yourself that every obstacle is proof of weakness, your confidence will slowly disappear. If you convince yourself that every mistake makes you a failure, you will begin avoiding risks altogether. The most resilient people tell themselves a different story. They view adversity as a teacher. They understand that difficulties often contain lessons that success cannot provide. Think back to the moments in your life that shaped you the most. Chances are, many of them were not easy experiences. Some of your greatest lessons likely came from mistakes, disappointments, losses, and challenges. At the time, those experiences felt painful. Looking back, however, they often became turning points. That is the strange gift hidden inside adversity. It forces growth. It exposes weaknesses that need attention. It develops patience, courage, humility, and resilience. It teaches lessons that comfort rarely teaches. This does not mean you should seek suffering or enjoy hardship. Difficult times are difficult for a reason. They test your emotional endurance. They challenge your confidence. They force you to confront uncertainty. But they also reveal strengths you never knew you possessed. Another challenge many people face is criticism. The moment you begin pursuing something meaningful, criticism often follows. Some criticism comes from strangers. Some comes from people who know you well. Sometimes it is constructive. Sometimes it is unfair. The problem is that many people allow criticism to stop them completely. They become so afraid of judgment that they abandon their goals before they have a chance to succeed. But consider this. Every person who has ever achieved something significant has faced criticism. People criticize what they do not understand. People criticize what challenges their beliefs. People criticize those who dare to stand out. If you are waiting for universal approval before pursuing your dreams, you may wait forever. Instead of viewing criticism as a reason to quit, learn to view it as information. Some criticism contains valuable feedback. Learn from it. Some criticism contains nothing useful at all. Let it go. Either way, do not allow other people's opinions to become more powerful than your own vision. Mastering your mind during difficult times also requires patience. Growth is rarely as fast as we want it to be. Progress often feels invisible. Results take longer than expected. During those periods, doubt can become loud. This is where many people give up. Not because they are incapable, not because success is impossible, but because they become discouraged before the results arrive. The individuals who eventually become impossible to ignore understand something the crowd often forgets. Persistence matters. The ability to continue despite uncertainty matters. The willingness to keep moving forward when the outcome is unclear matters, because every challenge survived strengthens you. Every setback overcome increases your resilience. Every obstacle faced with courage develops character, and character is one of the most powerful advantages a person can possess. The goal is not to create a life free from difficulty. Such a life does not exist. The goal is to develop a mindset strong enough to navigate difficulty without losing yourself. Because when you learn to master your mind during hard times, adversity stops being your enemy. It becomes your training ground, and the person who emerges from that training is stronger, wiser, and far more capable than the person who entered it. That is how ordinary people become extraordinary, not by avoiding life's storms, but by learning how to grow through them. Chapter 8. Developing skills that demand attention. Imagine two people walking into the same room. The first person immediately tries to gain attention. They talk loudly, seek recognition, and constantly try to convince others of their importance. The second person says very little. They don't chase attention. They don't need to. When a difficult problem appears, people naturally turn to them. When guidance is needed, their opinion carries weight. When opportunities arise, their name is mentioned. One person demands attention, the other attracts it, and the difference between them is value. In a world where millions of people compete for visibility, many focus on being noticed before they become valuable. They spend enormous amounts of energy trying to appear successful, intelligent, or influential. They carefully manage their image. They seek validation. They chase followers, recognition, and approval. But the individuals who become impossible to ignore understand a different principle. Instead of asking, "How can I get people to notice me?" they ask, "How can I become so valuable that people naturally notice me?" That question changes everything. The truth is that lasting recognition is rarely created by self-promotion alone. Attention gained through appearance can disappear quickly. Attention gained through trends can fade. Attention gained through luck can vanish. But attention earned through genuine value tends to endure. This is because value solves problems, value improves lives, value creates opportunities, and people naturally pay attention to those who consistently provide it. Think about the people you admire most. Chances are they became respected because they developed skills that mattered. They invested years learning, practicing, improving, and mastering their craft. Their reputation was built not on popularity, but on competence. Competence is one of the most attractive qualities a person can possess. When people know they can rely on you, trust begins to grow. When people recognize your expertise, opportunities begin to appear. When people see consistent excellence, respect follows naturally. This is why developing valuable skills is one of the most important investments you can ever make. Unlike trends, skills stay with you. Unlike possessions, skills cannot easily be taken away. Unlike luck, skills can be developed intentionally. The challenge, however, is that mastery requires patience. Most people want results quickly. They want recognition after a few weeks of effort. They want expertise without years of practice. They want rewards without enduring the learning process. But skill development operates according to a different timeline. It requires repetition. It requires persistence. It requires the willingness to be a beginner. And this is where many people quit. They become discouraged when progress feels slow. They compare themselves to experts and feel inadequate. They forget that every master once stood exactly where they stand now. The uncomfortable truth is that competence is often built through countless hours of invisible effort. The world sees the finished performance. It rarely sees the years of preparation behind it. The audience sees the confident speaker. They don't see the nervous beginner who struggled through early presentations. People admire the accomplished writer. They don't see the countless drafts, mistakes, and rejections that came first. They respect the successful entrepreneur. They don't see the years of uncertainty, failure, and learning that shaped that success. Behind every impressive skill lies a story of persistence. This is why developing skills demands humility. You must be willing to learn. You must be willing to make mistakes. You must be willing to look inexperienced while you improve. For many people, this is difficult because their ego wants immediate competence. They want to be good right away. But growth rarely works that way. Growth asks you to embrace discomfort. Growth asks you to be patient. Growth asks you to trust the process before the results become visible. The people who rise above the crowd accept this reality. They understand that every skill they develop becomes a form of personal leverage. Every new ability increases their capacity to contribute, solve problems, and create opportunities. Over time, this compounds. A person who reads consistently becomes more knowledgeable. A person who communicates effectively becomes more influential. A person who continuously improves their profession becomes more valuable. A person who develops emotional intelligence becomes better at building relationships. Each skill strengthens the others. Eventually, what once appeared ordinary becomes extraordinary. One of the greatest mistakes people make is assuming that talent is the most important factor in success. Talent can provide an advantage, but talent without development often goes nowhere. History is filled with naturally gifted individuals who never fulfilled their potential because they stopped growing. Meanwhile, countless people with average beginnings achieved remarkable results because they committed themselves to improvement. They understood that skills can often outperform talent. Why? Because skills grow, skills evolve, skills compound over time. This means your future is not limited by where you start. You may not control your natural abilities, but you control your effort. You control your learning. You control your willingness to improve, and those choices matter far more than most people realize. Another important truth is that valuable skills create confidence. Not the fragile confidence that depends on compliments or approval, but the deeper confidence that comes from competence. When you know you can solve problems, you feel different. When you know you can adapt, you feel different. When you know your abilities have been earned through hard work, you carry yourself differently. That confidence is difficult to fake because it is built on evidence. It comes from knowing what you are capable of. The remarkable thing is that the world eventually notices people who consistently become better, not because they are demanding attention, but because excellence naturally attracts attention. People seek out those who provide value. They remember those who solve problems. They respect those who demonstrate mastery. This is why the goal should never be fame. The goal should be usefulness. The goal should be growth. The goal should be becoming so skilled, reliable, and valuable that your work speaks before you do. Because in the end, the crowd is often obsessed with being seen, but the people who become impossible to ignore focus on becoming valuable. And when value becomes your priority, recognition often follows as a natural consequence, not immediately, not effortlessly, but inevitably. The more value you create, the more difficult it becomes for the world to overlook you. That is how true influence begins, not with attention, but with mastery. And mastery is built one skill, one lesson, and one day at a time. Chapter 9. Finding your unique voice. Have you ever noticed how easy it is to recognize certain people, even before they speak for long? It isn't always because they are the loudest person in the room. It isn't because they have the most impressive title or the greatest amount of money. Often what makes them memorable is something much deeper. There is a sense of authenticity about them. Their words sound genuine. Their actions align with their beliefs. They are not trying to be someone else. They have found their own voice. In a world filled with imitation, authenticity has become increasingly rare. Every day people are influenced by social media, trends, public opinion, and the expectations of others. They are constantly exposed to images of who they should be, how they should act, what they should pursue, and how success should look. Without realizing it, many people begin copying the lives of others. They imitate someone else's style. They adopt someone else's goals. They repeat someone else's opinions. They chase someone else's version of success. Over time, they become disconnected from who they truly are. The tragedy is that imitation may help you fit in, but it rarely helps you stand out. You cannot become unforgettable by becoming a copy. You cannot rise above the crowd by blending into it. The qualities that make you remarkable are often the very qualities that make you different. Yet many people spend years hiding those differences. They suppress their ideas because they fear judgment. They silence their opinions because they want acceptance. They ignore their passions because they seem unusual. They trade authenticity for approval. At first, this may seem like a safe choice. Fitting in often feels easier than standing out. It reduces conflict. It minimizes criticism. It creates a temporary sense of belonging. But there is a hidden cost. Every time you pretend to be someone you're not, you move further away from your authentic self. And when you lose touch with your authentic self, it becomes difficult to feel fulfilled. This is because human beings have a deep need for congruence. We want our actions, values, and identity to align. When they don't, something feels off. Even if we achieve external success, we often feel disconnected internally. Finding your unique voice begins with self-awareness. It requires asking honest questions. What matters most to you? What do you truly believe? What kind of life do you want to create? What strengths make you different? What values guide your decisions? These questions are not always easy to answer. In fact, many people avoid them because they require introspection. It is easier to follow the crowd than to examine your own identity, but growth requires honesty. The more clearly you understand yourself, the more confidently you can express yourself. And confidence in self-expression creates influence. People are naturally drawn to authenticity because authenticity feels real. In a world where many individuals wear masks, genuine people stand out. They communicate with conviction. They speak from experience. They are comfortable being themselves. This does not mean they are perfect. Authentic people still have flaws. They still make mistakes. They still experience doubt. The difference is that they are not pretending to be someone they are not. There is tremendous power in that. Consider how many influential individuals built their reputation by embracing their uniqueness rather than hiding it. They didn't become memorable because they copied others perfectly. They became memorable because they brought something distinct to the world. Their perspective was different. Their style was different. Their approach was different. That difference became their strength. One of the greatest fears people face is the fear of judgment. They worry that if they reveal who they truly are, others may criticize them, and sometimes that fear is justified. Authenticity does not guarantee universal approval. In fact, the more genuine you become, the more likely it is that some people will disagree with you. But that is not necessarily a bad thing. Trying to please everyone often leads to a watered-down version of yourself. You become so focused on avoiding criticism that you lose your individuality. The goal is not to be liked by everyone. The goal is to be respected for being genuine. Respect is built on honesty. Trust is built on consistency. Influence is built on authenticity. When those qualities come together, your voice becomes powerful. Another important aspect of finding your unique voice is learning to trust your experiences. Many people assume they have nothing valuable to offer because they compare themselves to experts. They underestimate the lessons they have learned, the challenges they have overcome, and the insights they have gained. But your experiences shape your perspective. Your perspective shapes your voice, and your voice has value precisely because it is yours. Nobody else has lived your exact life. Nobody else has faced your exact struggles. Nobody else sees the world exactly the way you do. That uniqueness matters. As you continue growing, developing skills and building confidence, your voice will become clearer. You will stop seeking constant validation. You will stop comparing yourself to everyone around you. You will begin speaking and acting from a place of authenticity rather than insecurity. And when that happens, people notice. Not because you are trying to impress them, not because you are demanding attention, but because authenticity has a presence that imitation can never replicate. The crowd follows trends. The crowd copies what is popular. The crowd seeks acceptance. But the people who become impossible to ignore are different. They know who they are. They know what they stand for, and they have the courage to express it. Because at the end of the day, your greatest advantage is not becoming more like everyone else. It is becoming more fully yourself. And when your actions, values, and voice align, you create something powerful, a presence that feels genuine, memorable, and impossible to overlook. Chapter 10. The Courage to Stand Alone. There are moments in life when the path ahead becomes painfully quiet, not because you have lost your direction, but because very few people are willing to walk the road you have chosen. At first, this loneliness can feel discouraging. You look around and notice that the people closest to you don't fully understand your vision. Some may question your decisions. Others may doubt your goals. A few may even laugh at your ambitions. The support you expected never arrives. The encouragement you hoped for remains absent. And in those moments, a difficult question emerges. Can I continue even if nobody believes in me? For many people, this is where the journey ends. Not because they lack talent, not because they lack potential, but because they cannot tolerate the discomfort of standing apart from the crowd. Human beings naturally seek belonging. We want acceptance. We want approval. We want to feel connected to the people around us. These desires are deeply rooted within us. For thousands of years, survival depended on being part of a tribe. Rejection often meant danger. Although the world has changed, that instinct remains. As a result, many people unconsciously sacrifice their dreams to preserve social comfort. They choose familiar paths because everyone else is following them. They avoid risks because they fear criticism. They abandon ambitions that make them different because they don't want to feel isolated. The problem is that extraordinary results rarely come from ordinary choices. The moment you decide to pursue something meaningful, you separate yourself from the majority. The moment you commit to growth, discipline, and excellence, your life begins moving in a direction that not everyone will understand. This is why courage becomes essential. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is the willingness to move forward despite fear. Many people imagine courageous individuals as fearless heroes who never experience doubt. The reality is far different. Courageous people often feel uncertainty. They experience anxiety. They wrestle with self-doubt. The difference is that they refuse to allow those emotions to control their decisions. They understand that fear is often a companion of growth. Whenever you step beyond your comfort zone, fear appears. Whenever you attempt something meaningful, fear appears. Whenever you move toward a bigger future, fear appears. Fear is not always a sign that you're moving in the wrong direction. Sometimes it is evidence that you're expanding beyond the limits of your current identity. One of the hardest forms of courage is maintaining belief in your vision when others cannot see what you see. Every significant achievement begins as an invisible possibility. Before a dream becomes reality, it exists only in the imagination of the person pursuing it. Nobody else can fully see it. Nobody else can fully feel it. Nobody else carries the same level of conviction. This creates a challenge. When results are absent and support is limited, your belief must become stronger than your circumstances. You must learn to trust the process before the evidence appears. You must learn to continue working when recognition is nowhere in sight. You must learn to remain committed when immediate rewards are unavailable. This is why standing alone often becomes part of personal growth. Not because isolation itself is valuable, but because it teaches self-reliance. When nobody is cheering for you, you learn how to encourage yourself. When nobody is holding you accountable, you learn discipline. When nobody is validating your progress, you learn to trust your own standards. These lessons are difficult, but they are incredibly powerful. Many people spend their lives depending on external validation. They need constant reassurance before taking action. They need approval before making decisions. They need praise before believing they are making progress. But the individuals who rise above the crowd eventually develop something stronger. They develop internal conviction. Internal conviction is the ability to remain committed to your values and goals regardless of external circumstances. It is the quiet confidence that says, "I know why I'm doing this, even if nobody else understands." That confidence becomes a source of stability during uncertain times. Of course, standing alone does not mean rejecting relationships or isolating yourself from others. Human connection remains important. Mentors, friends, and supportive communities can provide valuable encouragement. The key is learning not to depend entirely on their approval. Because there will be seasons when support is limited. There will be moments when people misunderstand your intentions. There will be times when your vision appears unrealistic to others. If your commitment depends entirely on external support, those moments can derail your progress. But if your commitment is rooted in purpose, you can continue moving forward. History repeatedly demonstrates this truth. Many of the people who changed industries, created innovations, or achieved extraordinary success spent years being doubted. Their ideas seemed unusual. Their goals appeared unrealistic. Their persistence looked irrational. Yet they continued, not because everyone believed in them, but because they believed in what they were building. That distinction matters. The crowd often seeks consensus before taking action. They wait for proof, permission, and approval. Visionary individuals are willing to move before those things arrive. They understand that certainty is often a luxury unavailable at the beginning of any meaningful journey. Another important lesson is that temporary loneliness does not mean permanent isolation. Many people mistakenly interpret lonely seasons as evidence that they are failing. In reality, growth often requires periods of separation. As you evolve, your priorities change. Your habits change. Your standards change. Sometimes your environment takes time to catch up. The loneliness you feel today may simply be the space between who you were and who you are becoming. That space can feel uncomfortable, but it can also be transformative, because it gives you the opportunity to strengthen your identity independent of external influences. It teaches you who you are when nobody is watching. It reveals what you truly value. It forces you to decide whether your dreams matter enough to continue pursuing them. And those decisions shape your future. The people who become impossible to ignore are rarely the ones who followed the crowd at every opportunity. More often, they are the individuals who develop the courage to walk their own path. They learn to trust their vision. They learn to endure criticism. They learn to continue despite uncertainty. Most importantly, they learn that standing alone for a season is sometimes the price of becoming someone extraordinary, because the road to excellence is not always crowded. The road to growth is not always comfortable, and the road to greatness is not always understood. But for those willing to walk it, the rewards extend far beyond recognition. They discover strength they never knew they possessed. They develop character that cannot easily be shaken, and they become the kind of person whose conviction, resilience, and purpose make them impossible to ignore. That journey begins the moment you stop asking who is willing to walk beside you and start asking whether you are willing to keep walking regardless. Chapter 11. Creating a reputation that speaks for you. Long before you enter a room, people often have an impression of you. Long before you introduce yourself, your name may already carry meaning. Long before you explain what you stand for, others may already have formed expectations based on what they have heard, seen, or experienced. This invisible force is called reputation. Whether you realize it or not, every action you take contributes to it. Every promise you keep, every commitment you honor, every challenge you face, and every interaction you have leaves a small mark. Over time, those marks accumulate. Eventually, they form a story about who you are, and that story begins speaking before you do. Many people spend years trying to get attention. They focus on appearance, image, and recognition. Yet some of the most respected individuals rarely need to promote themselves. Their reputation does the work for them. When their name is mentioned, people think of reliability. They think of excellence. They think of integrity. They think of someone who follows through. That kind of reputation is incredibly powerful because trust is one of the most valuable assets a person can possess. In today's world, trust has become increasingly rare. People are surrounded by exaggerated promises, temporary trends, and empty words. As a result, individuals who consistently do what they say they will do immediately stand out. The truth is that reputation is not built through grand gestures, it is built through ordinary moments repeated consistently. Many people imagine that respect is earned through a single achievement or breakthrough. While accomplishments can attract attention, long-term respect is usually built through consistency. Consistency is one of the most underrated qualities in personal development. Anyone can perform well once. Anyone can be motivated for a few days. Anyone can appear impressive for a short period of time. But consistency reveals discipline. Consistency reveals values. The person who consistently delivers quality work becomes trusted. The person who consistently shows up becomes dependable. The person who consistently treats others with respect becomes admired. Over time, these qualities become part of their reputation. Think about the people you trust most in your own life. Chances are your trust wasn't created overnight. It was built gradually through repeated experiences. They showed reliability. They demonstrated honesty. They followed through when it mattered. Trust is earned in small moments, a kept promise, a difficult conversation handled with integrity, a responsibility accepted without excuses, a commitment honored despite inconvenience. These moments may seem insignificant individually, but together they create something incredibly valuable. They create credibility. Credibility is what causes people to believe in you. Without credibility, words carry little weight. With credibility, even simple words carry influence. This is why character matters so much. Character is what you do when nobody is watching. It is how you respond when there is no reward. It is how you behave when there is no applause. Many people focus on managing their image. They carefully control how others perceive them. But image and reputation are not the same thing. Image is what people see. Character is who you are. And eventually, character shapes reputation. A polished image may attract attention temporarily, but only genuine character creates lasting respect. The individuals who become impossible to ignore understand this deeply. They recognize that influence is not something demanded, it is something earned. Every day, they make choices that strengthen their reputation. They keep their word. They take responsibility. They admit mistakes. They continue improving. They choose integrity, even when shortcuts are available. At first, these actions may seem ordinary, but over time, they create extraordinary results because reputation compounds. Just as small investments grow through compound interest, small acts of integrity grow through compound trust. Year after year, your actions build a track record. That track record becomes your reputation, and eventually, opportunities begin to appear because of it. People recommend those they trust. People hire those they trust. People follow those they trust. People support those they trust. This is why your reputation often becomes more valuable than any single achievement. An achievement may open a door. A reputation keeps it open. Unfortunately, many people damage their reputation by focusing on short-term rewards. They break promises when it becomes inconvenient. They prioritize immediate gain over long-term trust. They seek recognition without earning credibility. The consequences are often invisible at first. Trust doesn't disappear instantly. It erodes gradually. A broken promise here, a lack of accountability there, an act of dishonesty somewhere else. Over time, those small decisions weaken the foundation upon which respect is built. The opposite is also true. Every time you choose integrity, you strengthen that foundation. Every time you honor your commitments, you reinforce trust. Every time you act according to your values, you deepen your credibility. This process requires patience because reputation develops slowly. In a world obsessed with quick results, patience can feel frustrating. Many people want immediate recognition. They want influence without years of effort. They want respect before they have built a record of reliability. But meaningful reputation cannot be rushed. It is earned day by day, choice by choice, action by action. This is actually good news because it means anyone can begin building a stronger reputation immediately. You do not need extraordinary talent. You do not need fame. You do not need a perfect past. You simply need consistency. You need to become someone whose actions align with their words, someone who follows through, someone who can be counted on, someone who chooses integrity even when nobody would notice otherwise. That kind of person becomes increasingly rare, and rarity creates value. One of the most inspiring aspects of reputation is that it extends beyond personal success. Your reputation influences the lives of others. It affects your family, your friends, your colleagues, and your community. People observe your behavior. They learn from your example. They draw conclusions about what is possible based on the standards you maintain. This is why leadership often begins long before a title is earned. True leadership is not about authority. It is about example. The strongest leaders are not always the loudest voices in the room. Often, they are the individuals whose character inspires confidence. Their consistency creates trust. Their integrity creates influence. People follow them because they have earned respect. And respect cannot be forced. It must be deserved. As you continue your journey of growth, Remember that every day provides an opportunity to strengthen your reputation. Every interaction matters. Every promise matters. Every decision contributes to the story you are writing about yourself. Eventually, that story becomes powerful. It becomes something that speaks on your behalf when you are not present. It becomes something that opens doors before you knock on them. It becomes something that attracts opportunities, trust and influence naturally. Because in the end, the most powerful reputation is not built through self-promotion. It is built through consistent character. And when your reputation begins speaking for you, people no longer pay attention merely because of what you say. They pay attention because of who you have proven yourself to be. That is the kind of influence that lasts, and that is the kind of reputation nobody can ignore. Chapter 12. Becoming impossible to ignore. At the beginning of this journey, you may have believed that becoming impossible to ignore was about gaining attention. You may have imagined it meant becoming more popular, more visible, or more recognized by the world around you. Like many people, you may have assumed that influence comes from being seen, admired, or constantly noticed. But now, after everything we have explored together, you can see that the truth is far deeper than that. The people who become impossible to ignore are rarely obsessed with attention. They are obsessed with growth. They are obsessed with purpose. They are obsessed with becoming the best version of themselves. And because of that commitment, attention eventually finds them. This is one of life's great paradoxes. The more desperately people chase recognition, the more difficult it often becomes to earn. Yet the individuals who focus on creating value, developing character, and pursuing excellence naturally begin attracting respect. Why? Because true influence cannot be manufactured. It must be earned. Throughout this audiobook, we have followed a transformation. We began with the pain of being overlooked. We explored the need to stop seeking approval. We learned the power of responsibility, higher standards, self-belief, discipline, resilience, skill development, authenticity, courage, and reputation. Each lesson was important on its own, but their true power emerges when they work together. Think of them as pieces of a foundation. Responsibility gives you control. Standards give you direction. Self-belief gives you confidence. Discipline gives you consistency. Resilience gives you strength. Skills give you value. Authenticity gives you identity. Courage gives you freedom. Reputation gives you influence. When these qualities combine, they create something remarkable. They create a person who no longer depends on external validation to feel worthy. A person who no longer waits for permission before taking action. A person who no longer allows fear to dictate the direction of their life. That transformation is what makes someone impossible to ignore, because people are drawn to strength. They are drawn to purpose. They are drawn to individuals who know who they are and what they stand for. Not because those individuals are perfect, but because they possess qualities that have become increasingly rare. In a world full of distraction, they remain focused. In a world full of excuses, they take responsibility. In a world full of imitation, they remain authentic. In a world full of noise, they create value, and value always stands out. One of the greatest mistakes people make is believing that success is something they achieve once and then keep forever. In reality, becoming remarkable is not a destination. It is a lifelong process. There is no final point where growth becomes unnecessary. There is no finish line where discipline no longer matters. There is no stage where learning stops. The people who continue rising are those who remain committed to improvement long after others become comfortable. This mindset is what separates temporary success from lasting significance. Temporary success often depends on circumstances. Lasting significance depends on character. Character is what remains when achievements fade. Character is what remains when applause disappears. Character is what remains when life becomes difficult. That is why your greatest goal should never be simply to accomplish impressive things. Your greatest goal should be to become an impressive person. Because achievements may attract attention, but character sustains influence. As you move forward from this point, remember that becoming impossible to ignore does not mean becoming the loudest voice in the room. Some of the most influential people speak quietly. Some of the most respected people seek very little attention. Some of the most remarkable people never become famous. Yet their impact is undeniable. They influence lives through their actions. They inspire others through their example. They create opportunities through their contributions. They leave places better than they found them. That is real influence. Real influence is not measured by how many people know your name. It is measured by the value you bring to the lives of others. It is measured by the trust you build. It is measured by the difference you make. This is an important distinction because many people spend years chasing visibility while neglecting value. They want recognition before contribution. They want status before service. They want rewards before growth. But the individuals who leave lasting legacies understand something different. Contribution comes first. Growth comes first. Service comes first. Recognition is simply a byproduct. Another truth worth remembering is that your circumstances do not define your future. Many people begin their journey from difficult places. They face limitations, setbacks, disappointments, and obstacles. Some experience rejection, others experience failure. Many spend years feeling overlooked, yet history repeatedly proves that beginnings do not determine endings. Your current situation is not your final destination. Your past mistakes are not permanent labels. Your previous failures are not predictions of your future. The person you become is shaped by the choices you make from this moment forward. Every day presents an opportunity to move closer to your highest potential. Every day presents an opportunity to learn, to improve, to grow, to contribute. The remarkable thing about personal development is that small decisions often create extraordinary outcomes. A single habit repeated consistently can transform a life. A single skill developed patiently can create opportunities. A single courageous decision can alter your future. Most transformations do not happen overnight. They happen gradually, quietly, one decision at a time, one day at a time, one choice at a time. That is why patience matters. Many people abandon their goals because progress feels slow. They compare their beginning to someone else's success. They become discouraged because results do not arrive immediately. But growth is often invisible before it becomes obvious. Just as a tree spends years strengthening its roots before reaching impressive heights, personal growth often develops beneath the surface before the world notices. Do not underestimate those hidden seasons. The work you do in private eventually appears in public. The discipline you practice today creates opportunities tomorrow. The standards you maintain today shape the person you become. Trust the process. Trust your growth. Trust your ability to improve, because every step forward matters. As this journey comes to an end, take a moment to reflect on how far you have already come. Consider the lessons you have learned. Consider the person you are becoming. You are no longer the individual who waits for recognition before believing in yourself. You are no longer the person who depends entirely on approval. You are no longer the person who allows fear to determine your future. You are becoming someone stronger, someone more disciplined, someone more confident, someone more valuable, someone more authentic. And that transformation has power. The world does not need more people trying to impress others. It needs more people committed to excellence, more people committed to integrity, more people committed to growth, more people committed to making a meaningful contribution. Be one of those people. Continue learning, continue improving, continue showing up, continue becoming. Because the people who become impossible to ignore are not born that way. They build themselves that way, day by day, choice by choice, challenge by challenge. And if you remain committed to that process, there will come a time when your presence speaks before you do, your work earns respect before you ask for it, and your character leaves an impact long after you are gone. That is what it truly means to rise above the crowd, and that is the legacy worth pursuing.